We're here today for you to help me learn how to create a platform or website. You're going to teach me how it works.
Absolutely. And it's way cheaper. Like I started out my journey with Squarespace, and they charge 200 a year, 200 plus a year. It's so much cheaper just to do your own development. Well, first out. And it's honestly a pretty easy path. It seems like there's a pretty well accepted web development path for people to get up to making a web app. And that's first learning GitHub and then learning HTML and CSS to put something on your GitHub. And then you can go on to JavaScript, which does interactive logic. And JavaScript is really powerful. It can actually carry you all the way through full stack. I am currently using TypeScript, which is another layer above for JavaScript. And it's pretty much everything I need as a full stack developer. I am learning C++ now for my Unreal game engine development, so I can do some VR studio development. Hit me up if you want to work with me from the future. And yeah, that's like, it's definitely a different language, but it's definitely on par with like TypeScript and stuff. So yes, technology stack. Thank you for leading me on to the next most important overview of what your web development will be like. How does your website run? That is your technology stack. There is front end, back end, and middleware. Front end is stuff your user sees, like a website. Or a social media post can even be considered front end if you really want to go that hard, because you can have like APIs and stuff do like automated posting. It's really cool stuff now. Anyways, back to the topic at hand, tech stack. Front end is what the user sees. Middleware is what communicates between the front end and back end, and often is security checks and other checks to make sure that the front end is or the back end is shielded from the front end, because the back end is what you want to be protected. That's where all your business logic is. That's where user information is. That's where things that you need cybersecurity to be focused on is. So you want to protect your back end. And that's by providing checking logic on your front end and middleware. And you can also do checking validation on your back end for a fully secure stack. But I think I should move on now to databases. They are an ancillary part of the technology stack, and it's where you hold data online or in the cloud. If your operation is fully in the cloud, your front end is on a CDN, which is a content delivery network, and your back end is operating on a cloud platform, and your database is operating on a serverless platform, you are a completely in the cloud web app. You do not have physical hardware holding down your application. Now that's a broad misnomer, but I think reasonable people can understand what I mean by that. No single piece of hardware holds your stuff. It's the whole of your content providers, like AWS, Cloudflare, GoDaddy, or any of these others. AWS is Amazon Web Services, which is a majority of the internet. Should know about that.
Is that a good thing to do?
Or? Oh, it is a good thing. Well, okay, so I say it's largely a good thing, but as with everything in life, it depends. Your use case will really define what you're doing. For a DAO, yes, you want to be serverless, you want to be in the cloud, you want to be agile on the internet. And that's what cloud computing and serverless design provides. And all that means is that you're not running anything on any hardware you own. And the term for this, which is stupid, is on-prem, which means on premises or on site, hardware you are actually using. Things that could be a server or like a Raspberry Pi. Would-be developers definitely probably have one of these in their shelves somewhere. It's a tiny computer. It's like $80, but the technology has advanced so much that you can get a $4 computer that's as powerful as this if you want to do some C++ work on making it work. But Raspberry Pi is a really fun little like independent computer. It's literally this big. This is the computer. So you can use the Raspberry Pi as a server. You just need it to be like on and connected to the internet. That would be a on-premises server. You would have a physical, real server with a Raspberry Pi. And that's fine if you're doing like a small operation that is constantly running. So if you are having, let's say, a multiplayer game between you and 12 friends, on AWS, that would be about $500 a month. And that's kind of an absurd amount of money. But a Raspberry Pi is $100 and could easily run that server. So it's a question on what your use case is and what you need. And for common applications, like being a decentralized web app, which is what a lot of companies already are, AWS is perfectly fine for that. They have a great free tier, but once you get outside of that free tier, it does get a bit more difficult to use AWS because they are a market leader, and while they have aggressive pricing, they are using their market share aggressively. They could be lowering their prices further. They are doing it at a specific enough pace where you can still find cheaper deals from some small outfits, but they are still ahead of 80% of like the market because they largely are 80% of the market.
So you're telling me I can expect to pay some money to do this?
If you want to have a DAO with more than a few hundred people, yes. Especially if you have like 50 or 60 very active people on your app doing tons and tons of interactions and requests. Yes.
Who's the market leader?
Amazon Web Services, AWS. They are easily 60% of the internet's infrastructure right now. So that's one of those things we'll cross the bridge when we get to it. That is very much full stack development. We have not even gotten to GitHub. I'm just giving an overview of the journey. And yeah, once you are at full stack, you can do anything. You can go anywhere. You can build your own full app. You can literally do anything with the internet at that point. Anything commercial, you know. There's a lot more on the back end if you want to like do less than legal things. But I'm not going to talk about those things. I think people can read between the lines on their own if they're interested. MADAO needs every skill set, and we are happy to pay MADAO for every skill set. Anyways, so GitHub. GitHub is the first cornerstone step, I believe, in any development journey. So I suppose I will boot up a new browser instance, give a screen share of... Here's GitHub. This is, for all intents and purposes, this is GitHub. This is what your dashboard will look like once you have an account. But I completely understand why when you got here, there's a lot to look at. There are large categories here. You got a search bar, which you can search all of GitHub, which has all these little repositories I've been looking at. You have your own repositories, which are, a repository is just a version controlled container. It is a title you give to a folder structure. So like how you can create a new folder on your desktop, that's what a repository is. Except you can send the link of this folder to anyone on the internet. That's why GitHub is so powerful. Version control is cornerstone to cooperative and collaborative development. So let's take a look at the MADAO itself organization, because that's the next interesting thing with GitHub. And if you're viewing this, you likely already are part of the organization. So if you saw what I did, I went down to my profile, clicked over to my organizations, and now I'm part of these organizations: Droplet Diaries, Blockchain Learning Center, and Mutual Aid DAO. Yeah, let's get into the DAO here. So this is what the organization looks like. You can see over here with this tab, the people that are part of the organization, and you can also invite people. So what's your GitHub email or username? There it is.
All right.
Let's invite. And I will punch in my password, and you are going to be invited as a member. So if you open up your GitHub, you can now see an invitation to this organization.
So now what do I do to find that invitation? Because we'll get that done and then we'll go back to you.
So if you go just like I did to your profile in the top corner, now in GitHub, there you are. And then go to your organizations, you'll see a blue dot there next to your organizations. That blue dot means you have a notification. So you can join.
Join?
Yep. Go ahead and click join. There you are. Now you are a member of MAIDAO's GitHub organization.
Oh, wow.
If you want to scroll down a little bit, you can see these are all the repositories we've developed. Specifically, all the repositories I've developed.
Okay,
so,
this is where you work.
This is where I dump things. I'll show you where I actually work in a little bit. This is where you'll start and end, because you will get files from GitHub and you will dump files to GitHub. And I'll explain exactly how you do that in the workflow later. Just keep in mind that this is where things go for collaborative sharing. So if you want to click into the repository that just says MAIDAO, that is our website. And you can see most of it if you scroll down a little bit and look on the right side of the screen. 87% of it is HTML. This is how GitHub shows exactly how much code is in what language, so that you can get a quick glance on whether you can interact with this repository sufficiently or not.
Okay.
So this is a very basic website and a very basic repository. 87% of it is HTML, 7% of it is CSS. So over 94% of it is the most basic language. I have done nothing super complex with this. And there's only 5% of JavaScript, which is really just to handle a couple of animations. And that 0.1 of shell, that's server-side stuff, because I threw in some code there, but I don't think it's actually working code in shell. Don't worry about that. It's literally 0.1%. Now that we have shown GitHub, let's get GitHub onto your computer. So scroll up a bit. This is the link. I'm going to be dumping it into chat. And if you could post it alongside the video wherever you get it, this is desktop.github.com. This is the GitHub link that allows you to download GitHub Desktop. GitHub Desktop is really easy to use, and I love it. It makes the workflow a lot better, so that you don't really have to go to GitHub website outside of looking for new repositories.
So I'm looking at it now. Do I click on it?
Click it. Get it in your browser so I can see it. There we go. Go ahead and click download for your Windows 64. There is a Mac version of this download as well, if anyone watching this later has a Mac. And there's a Linux one as well. Please feel free to use whatever operating system you want. We really don't care. Windows is just the most popular, so we're going to go with that. Run it. Get GitHub installed on your computer. This way we don't have to use the browser. It uses GitHub's own application to run stuff. I'm also going to share another link for VS Code. So whenever you download an application onto your computer, it doesn't have the authentication that your browser does. So you have to authenticate again. So sign into GitHub and it will go to your browser, which has the authentication, and you can just authorize in your browser here.
Authorize desktop?
Yep. Put in your password. And then let it open up GitHub. And there you go. And you can, when you're configuring your Git here, you can choose how your commits are shown. So a commit is when you have written some code and done some changes, and you're ready to share it with the repository, you will commit your changes. And once you commit your changes, you will add a title and a description of what you've done. And then you will push them to the origin. That means you will update the online database. You'll be pushing all of your commits to the main branch, or whatever branch you're working on. Branches are different mirrors of development. Like you'll have the main branch that people will use, that will be the website they see. And then you can have a development branch where your developers use it and see. This is what shows when you do commits. So you can see the example commit on the bottom here. It shows happy to BTC when you fix all the things or whatever title you put. And this is the email that people will see if they want to reach you. Now, GitHub does redirect your email to the one that you have signed up with if you want. This is a good protection. So if you want to just click finish, you can set it up just like this. For advanced users, if there's a specific email you want to be shown, you can enter it in that drop-down panel that we have skipped over. We have skipped over it because it's advanced. If you look over to the right half of this app, you'll see your repositories and then Mutual Aid DAO. That is the organization you're a part of, and the repository is there. If you go to Mutual Aid DAO / MayDAO, it looks like a fork. It looks like click on that. And then clone Mutual Aid DAO / MayDAO. Now this will take all the files from GitHub and they will put them onto this folder in your computer.
You need to click clone, right?
Yep. It'll go to that local path that it shows there in your documents, in GitHub, in MayDAO's folder. So you can click it to contribute or click for this is just the base website. You can click for my own purposes. You can always reclone a repository if you want to do something else with it. Right now, we're going to make a fork.
Click continue.
Yes. Now, this is your own repository with your own authority. You own this. So you can make any changes you want and push it to the origin as much as you want. Now, if you are contributing to a parent project, which is the other option, you would have to make a pull request, which is when you commit your code, you will send a request for it to be looked over by other contributors. And then some other contributor will look at your code, see if it is appropriate to the project and it does solve the issue that your commit describes. They will then merge that pull request into the main project and your code will be updated into the project. For right now, let's just explore and have fun playing around in your own repository.
So I just go to commit to main?
You can't commit. You don't have anything to commit. And in fact, you can't even look at your code easily. Right now, the only way you could look at your code is with a Notepad or some other text file solution. What you need now is an integrated development environment. And I'm going to drop the link to this IDE called Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is the most popular integrated development environment, or IDE. What this allows you to do is to see your code in very colorful lines, so you can see where there are errors or where there are variables versus logic. And it also has extensions, meaning you can download a lot of support to do edge case things. So for example, one of the extensions I have installed is a TypeScript formatter, which takes the TypeScript errors and translates them into a more layman way of understanding, because the current TypeScript errors are terribly complex. They are for computer engineers. So it's hard for me to read those errors. But with this extension, those errors are translated into a very human readable way. That's just a small example of the extensions that you can get with VS Code.
Do I want to download this?
Go ahead and download it. And when that's done downloading, go ahead and run it.
I'm just clicking OK.
That's all you gotta do. That's it. Keep clicking OK. Everything for the default is completely perfect for a beginner. The only time you will ever mess with those is if you specifically know what you want. Okay, if we click finish, this is VS Code. Go ahead and set it up. You got a few things to make it the way you want. Here first is how it looks. You see these 4 options here?
Yeah, I like live myself.
Then go ahead and choose it. There you go. If you like this, click on to the next one, sync to and from other devices. Try clicking it again on the words there, not on the button. There you are.
Enable settings sync, is that, or?
You don't need to do that because you don't have multiple computers that you're running VS Code from.
Okay.
So for right now, you don't need that. You can always come back to sync. Go back to the one shortcut or go down to the next one. Again, the words, not the button, because the button will just check it off for you. Or the radial dot will just check it out for you.
Open command palette.
Oh yes, Control Shift P. This is an important shortcut for beginners to know. If you hit Control Shift P while VS Code is selected, it will bring up the one search bar to rule them all. So you can search for anything. You can search for files, you can search for extensions, you can search for any setting, you can search for anything in the search bar. And it's an important keyboard to remember, keyboard shortcut to remember. So you can click on to the next one, rich support for all your languages. So this is, if you already have like some extensions you know you want, you can go ahead and click that browse to go to the extensions panel and start shopping for or looking around for extensions to install. So we can go ahead and install HTML CSS there that says CSS IntelliSense for HTML above for that one. IntelliSense is coloring. So it will show, it does a lot of visual changes so that it's easier for you to view HTML, for you to look through links, for you to see classes versus IDs. It's a fun little thing, and it's a great example on what installing an extension is. It's already installed. You can see up there, you can have the options to disable or uninstall it. That means that it is installed and in your IDE. It has been integrated into your development environment. So if we close Visual Studio Code, because we don't need it right now, we go back to GitHub, the desktop application that we have in the taskbar at the bottom there. This was an automatic window that was opened up to allow you to read some documentation for VS Code. I'm going to basically walk you through this already. So you can go back and view this. This is a great resource if you need additional help, but I'm going to explain a lot of this. Yep, click that.
Oh,
cool. So if you click in the top bar that says not repository. So if you click open in an external editor, it should automatically detect VS Code. So if you click trust, you can trust all the folders from GitHub, trust the authors of DAO's GitHub. And you can now see that there's a Git that you need. Click download Git, because this is another piece of GitHub, which is the explicit version control portion. This is like how it will see that you've done edits versus other people. So go and click download for Windows, or click that Windows button there. But click here to download at the top. There you are.
Oh man, it's so good to have a guide.
Absolutely. And now go ahead and run that exe. There you are. Go ahead and agree to its license. It's a GNU, pretty basic. Click next. It's basically, this software is provided to you as is for public use. Don't sue us if you get angry at it. That's basically the
cool.
contract.
So now next.
Yep, go ahead and install it into Git. You can also go ahead and do next. All these things are good for a beginner. Click on that drop down real quick and see if you can click VS Code. Instead
Here.
of, yeah, click that and see if there's a VS Code option. Visual Studio Code as Git's default editor. Click that. There you are. Click next and keep going. You're basically going to click next through all the next stuff because it's pretty much, yep. It's just a bunch of stuff that if you want it specific, you will know, and you will be waiting for it to come up so you can change it. But if you don't know what it is, probably default will be good for you. And yeah, after we get Git installed, let's take a quick smoke break because we are now past the first major hurdle, getting everything installed.
Click finish.
Yep, click finish. Oh, bash. That's what Git is for. So it's for version control, but there's also a shell terminal that you can use called bash. Git bash is a really useful terminal for when you need to run a few Git specific commands. But that's advanced stuff. We won't get into it today.
Where am I?
You can close this window. You can close this tab.
I can stop share, right?
No, not quite yet. Not quite. Just close this tab. You don't need to be in this tab. You don't need to be in the VS tab either.
Right here, click this.
Yeah.
Close this tab.
Yeah, close this tab, close that tab. You can close this tab. You can close all the GitHub tabs, actually.
This one?
Yep. You can even close this one.
Yeah.
So now you can minimize this window. So now that we are in Visual Studio Code, you can see on the left-hand side, the Explorer. This is the File Explorer. You can see DAO is the parent folder, and then you can see all the other stuff in that parent folder. Let's start with the deprecated. It's alphabetical, and it's an important piece of development understanding. If you write code and don't need it anymore, do not delete it. Copy paste it if you need to keep the file and put it into the deprecated dot whatever you need, or just take the entire file and shove it into the deprecated folder. You never know when you'll need to revisit even badly written code because it could have some interesting workaround, some quirk that you didn't expect, didn't need, but could use later. Never know with the future. So just dump anything you don't want in the deprecated folder. That's what deprecated means. It's not being used, but it still has value. You can go and close this folder. There's nothing really to look at. I just wanted to explain the folder itself. No. So reopen VS Code through the way that I showed you by going up to repository in your GitHub. Open an external editor. Now, when you even now, if you close this again, don't. But if you do, we can just close GitHub, relaunch it, and it will actually detect VS Code and have a big blue button that will say open this repo in VS Code, and it will be very easy to just launch this.
Okay.
If you go to the deprecated folder and click on it, it will collapse the folder. Or yeah, there you go. Now if we go to images, this is just where I dump all the image files that we are using as assets in the website. I'm starting out slow so that we are seeing folders that you're familiar with, files that you're familiar with, because now we are going to leap into things that are not familiar. And I want to prepare everyone that's following along with us for that. Go ahead and close that images folder. All right, so if you double click on index.html, there it is. Now, if you click on it once, it will just open it. If you double click it.
I did double click it.
So if you look at the top tab for index.html, you'll see that there's an X next to it, just like your web browser, where you can close these tabs and close it.
It's right here.
Next to it is the file name, and it's italicized. Italicized means that it's only temporarily open. It's open as long as you're clicking on it. So if you click on like faq.html, if you want to click on faq.html real quick, so I can show you how VS Code works a little bit.
This,
Yes. You notice how your index.html disappeared and has been replaced with faq. That is because you are only temporarily looking at one file. If you want to open up multiple tabs of files so you can flick back and forth, you need to double click on the file quickly enough to make it open as a solid tab. The way you can tell that it's a solid tab is if the text of the tab is regular. If it's italicized, it means it's only a temporary tab.
oh, okay.
Yes. So that's why I was saying you need to double click on index.html and do it quickly enough to make it a solid tab.
This one.
Yes. There, now you see that the text of the tab name itself has changed to straight up and down regular text.
Right.
That means it's a solid tab. Now, if you click on faq.html now, faq.html.
Here.
Yeah. It opens in a new temporary tab. This is a really important thing to know for VS Code, because you will be operating between many, many files, and you're going to have an abstract image of how these different files talk to each other and compile to make one cohesive experience. And having multiple tabs open and knowing how to open multiple tabs and knowing that a temporary tab is italicized is really helpful for that. We are now at the point where you can really start doing code. If you know what you're doing, at this point, you can start writing.